Okay, guys, we are good to get started. I want to welcome everybody here. This is going to be very interesting. We are going to talk a little bit in high level about what's happening in the industry and how this affects us as designers, but also how it affects the way that we think. So I hope you guys all enjoy it and that you learn something from this. We've had a lot of fun just thinking about it. So first of all, let's just get this clear. The reason we're all in this meeting and this presentation is that there'll be 50 years of innovation that is going to come at us in the next 5 years. It's a big statement to think about, so we can just break it down a little bit. Let's look at what 50 years of innovation has looked like before, and then we'll come back to this idea. In the 1930s, this patent was submitted, and most of you probably have no idea what that is. I certainly didn't. But it was in the 1930s that they invented sliced bread. And you probably all know the saying that the best thing since sliced bread. This was a revelation for consumers and for technology. And between the 1930s and the 1980s, so 50 years of innovation, we landed up having molecular nanotechnology. We had the graphic user interface, which effectively spawned the Macintosh and Windows and computers as we know it today. We had DNA sequencing. We had mobile phones and cellular networks, and we had the CD-ROM. So a massive jump in 30 years from sliced bread to these forms of technology, right? Pretty radical. So when I say something like the next 5 years is going to bring us 50 years of innovation, it will be a leap like going from sliced bread in the 1930s all the way up to having a smartphone today. And this is really because of the rate of speed that the technologies for 3D and AI are having, and the impact they're going to have on visual industries like ours. And more specifically, when I think about designers, we work in the built environment. We work with physical things. And while there's been so much design innovation for sectors like Canva, for graphic design, and Figma, for UX design and vector-based graphics, there hasn't been that much impact on the built environment, physical-based designers, people that touch and feel real things. And that's all going to change very, very quickly. And what I want to be able to talk about today is that this isn't something to be afraid of. This is actually one of the most incredible things to happen to us as designers. And by the end of this, I really hope that you'll see that I genuinely believe there is no better time for us to be a designer. I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'll do this briefly. My name is Guy, and I am the CEO and founder of MattoBoard, and I'm also partner of an award-winning design practice in London. And for the last 2 decades, I have been working for ultra-high net worth individuals and celebrities building their homes and retreats around the world. And I also am a design mentor for the Masters of Design class at the Royal College of Art. And I founded MattoBoard, which I will talk about a little bit briefly at the end, because it's part of this future of design tools. And we have quite an exciting opportunity to offer the guys and girls who are on this call. But MattoBoard.com, if you don't know, we're an online tool for discovering materials and products and for creating 3D material boards. And our software allows you to experience products and textures in rich detail because it is a 3-dimensional environment. We call this virtual sampling, and we believe that this is the future of how we will specify and generate our concepts for materials. But I want to tell you all a little bit of a quick story. So it's a slight segue. This is an image of my late father and my mother. And my parents are much older than all of my friends' parents. And my dad grew up in the 1930s, in fact. But both my mother and my father, for as long as I could remember growing up, were really obsessed with music. Like they had music in their bones, and they loved 1950s and 1960s jazz and rock and roll. So the house was always filled with music. And this was generally in the form of them playing LPs or vinyl records, right? Scratchy sounds with a big vinyl player. And as technology progressed, when we were kids and we got those CD-ROMs, and eventually we got MP3 players, and eventually we got mini discs, if anyone can remember that, short-lived, wasting my money. But eventually then we also got Spotify. And during this process, if you were young enough to adapt to the technology, you could. But I then recognized that my parents hadn't listened to music for years. Their generation had been looked over by a lot of the technology and this innovation in putting things onto CDs and eventually onto the web. And my parents missed music. And the reason I'm showing you this picture is because in this moment, they are singing and dancing with my little nephew. And the reason that they're doing is because that little thing at the bottom of the picture. So that is the first generation of the Google Home, voice activated. When I brought that home, I put it down onto my father's table. He was unable to walk at this point in his life. And I showed him how to talk to it and ask for music. So the first thing he does is he asks for Little Richie, and music starts playing. And his eyes totally lit up. At that point, I realized I brought music back into their household. And that this technology of talking to this little speaker, which I found, very simple and easy to use, was also easy for his generation. That talking to something totally unlocked music back into our house, bouncing off the walls. And every time I went to go visit them, there was music playing through this Google Home. And it was a real revelation to me. And I sometimes think back to this idea of Steve Jobs, who spoke about the fact that humans are tool builders. That's what we do. We create tools to make ourselves more efficient and effective. When I think about it, I realize that when you have interfaces that remove friction from our life, they will change our behavior and they begin to amplify our output. So Steve Jobs, he's very famous for quoting this idea that technology was a bicycle for the mind. And what he means is that there was a scientific journal that was trying to understand the efficiency of locomotion. And in the list of the mammals and species on Earth that were the most efficient for burning fuel and gaining speed in a straight line, on the top of the list was the condor. It's a type of eagle. And 5 or 6 places down below was humans, right? Homo sapiens, meant to be like the rulers of the earth, top of the food chain, and there we were as not being the most efficient. Until someone said, well, why don't we measure humans on a bicycle? And of course, at that point, we leaped all the way to the top of the list. And this is what he means by human beings are tool builders. And when we think about design in our future, design isn't really just about creativity, but as we move into this future, design is really all about our ability to collaborate with tools. And as we get into this presentation, it will be very clear that the designers who adapt, we will win the next decade. And these tools will be easier and our behaviors will change in the same way that my father could speak to that Google Home. So there are 3 things I believe will happen in the future, and you're going to see those things unfold a little bit in this presentation. And so some of these sentences may not make sense to you at first, but they will to other people. Let's see how it unravels. But the 3 things I believe is that, number 1, natural language and conversation. This will be the minimum expected interface with all software in the future. And then relevant to us is that real-time output, our ability to see things in real time. This will close the gap between idea and accurate visualization almost instantaneously. Our current loop as designers is we have an idea, we sketch it out, we have to 3D model things, and then we have to render them out. We get feedback from a client, we go back to sketch, we go back to idea, we back to model, we go then to the render. In the future, which is really from today, the new loop is that we'll have an idea and we'll be able to visualize it. It will be instant. And then finally, we can find some time to chat about the fact that everyone will have a co-creator, often called an AI agent in technology media today. But effectively, this means that designers, we're going to do less administrating and we're going to do more of the creative work. We're going to have AI assistants that will do a lot of the grunt work for us in our everyday practice. In 2022, we got this idea of text to image. You could create a prompt and you get an image from it. By 2024, we had the ability to take an image and create a video. And in 2025, we're going to see the ability to go from an image into 3D. And 3D is incredibly important for us because I believe that because 3D isn't just a technology to us, this is the language of modern day design practices. This is our ability to craft and shape and tool our ideas today. And AI is going to play a big role in facilitating that 3D evolution for us. Now, if you looked at these set of imagery over here, and I had to ask you to tell me which one is AI generated, I think it's pretty obvious. And you'll look at the one on the left-hand side and you would say that that is AI generated. And of course, it's a trick question. They are all AI generated. And this is by someone named Oleg, and I would highly recommend you guys check him out. He's really quite a master at using AI tools for generating. And I'll show you a little bit about the workflow and how we use this in practice today. But this is the type of detail that we're getting today. And the real difference here is that the one on the left is something that I did maybe a year ago, and the output on the right-hand side is something that you can get today. There is a skill set that sets us apart from one another, and Oleg is much better at crafting prompts and has a workflow, which I can also talk about. I'm just going to quickly mention some tools that we're starting to see in practice today. Now, this isn't a tutorial in how to use any of the tools. This talk is more about just expanding the way that we as designers think and understand the impact of what's happening around us. So this isn't a tutorial, and there's so many good ones on YouTube. But some of the tools that are out there that we're starting to see in practice are, of course, Midjourney, Sora, which is the ability to create videos from a text prompt, but also from an image. And I think this is going to be incredibly useful for our ability to communicate to designers, to communicate to our clients, our ideas once we've generated the image. So an extremely exciting future for us. And there's also Unreal Engine. This is the ability to create real-time rendering and design processes through a 3D software that produces sort of ray-traced renderings in real time. And, you know, the love-hate relationship that we all have with SketchUp as interior designers is most because of how easy it is to use. And SketchUp is also pushing towards being able to bring you some form of generative imagery through SketchUp Diffusion. We're also using Twinmotion. This is another extremely compelling real-time rendering software and output. And I encourage you all to have a look at those. But when I think about the most fundamental shift in the designer's workflow today, it's this, that in 2024 and historically, all of us would draft to visualize. And what I mean by that is we would have an idea, we would sketch it out, and then we would have to 3D model it. We'd have to draw up our CAD plans, we'd have to model our software, model the room, and then we would create a visualization. Only then would we get our client feedback and have to go back to drafting. So the 3D tools and the visualization tools that we've had have really made our process of going from sketch and iterating and generating ideas and having that sense of creativity that we used to do maybe with a hand sketch, and putting in the way rigid 3D geometric software before we can even get it. And it's always been a frustration, the hours and hours it's taken us to draft and then to visualize, only then to get feedback. 2025, this is the biggest shift that will happen to the designer's workflow, is from 2025, we will begin to see our industry move from visualizing first and then drafting. Now, of course, after drafting, you have another phase of visualizing. But this is the concept that we will be able to generate ideas and move from an idea to some form of vision in a much faster and iterative process before we need to actually draft and do heavy lifting in 3D. This is really going to make us so much more creative and so much more ideation. But it's going to be a messy process, which I'll show you. But if we look at all of these images, now all of these images have been generated from visualization software, mostly Midjourney and some Stable Diffusion as well. And this is where you begin to realize that the future of design is actually more creative and more immersive, and it's far more customizable. And that our ability to interact with the software and to utilize the software to generate our ideas is going to be such a huge unlock for us, and really is going to expand the way that we create and experiment. And I think that any firm and designer that starts to adapt to the software will really be the ones that win and push their own ideas and their interfaces into new ways of working. So one of the things I think about here, and we talk about in design communities and when we're building software like MattoBoard and trying to pioneer the future of digital tools for designers, this topic comes up a lot, which is, what does this mean? You know, what does it really mean to have taste? And one of the things you began to recognize when we were looking at all of those images is that they are all very beautiful. They're hypnotic, they're seductive, and there is like a coherence to them. They make sense. Maybe they didn't last year with chairs with no legs, but they're slowly getting more and more comprehensive. And you get the feeling that anyone can produce some form of beautiful art or something of relative taste. And so it begs the question, well, what actually is taste? And when I think of where we are, sort of yesterday, there is this, upside down cone-shaped graph where there's always been a hell of a lot of good taste. And there is this gap, and it's the kind of the gap to great. There's very few people in the design community in any field of design, whether you're graphic, whether you're product, whether you're architecture, interior design, where you have great taste. So there is something about your discerning eye and your ability to compose that allows you to have great taste. Now, in the world of generative AI, what we're going to land up seeing is just a hell of a lot more good taste. And that means that the gap to great taste will increase in proportion to the amount of good taste we're going to see out there. But that doesn't mean that great taste won't exist. It just changes it. It's now that everyone has the ability to visualize and create things that are very beautiful. And so you'll see a lot more of that. But great taste is going to become a measure of your discernment and your ability to think from a unique perspective from your lived experiences. And so while we're going to become more creative and generate more ideas, the most amazing thing will begin to happen is that I believe that your unique personality as a designer will be the antidote to all of this so-called good taste. And that your lived experiences and your ability to understand a client's problem and bring a husband and wife's ideas together to create a form of interior design, to understand the context behind their homes, to understand the history of a site, the complications of a big company and what they want to project out into the world with their interior design. Your ability to think is going to be how you create great taste and stand out. You will just have more and more tools at your disposal to create ideas more quickly. And so you can think of it that when good taste is on tap, it will be this quirkiness and your thinking and your ability to solve problems and pulling them all together. That is what really is going to stand out in the future. And now, one thing we should set straight is that when we think about these design tools, everyone thinks, oh, well, you can produce something very, very beautiful in an instant. And this is not true. And this is where the gap from good taste to great taste really will sit, is that being able to generate something instantly never really fits the project. It will always require you to think and mold and merge and tinker to finally get what is right for your palette. And so when I think about it, I think of a sculptor. In this case, we're looking at a clay sculptor, and the clay sculptor has this beautiful finished product that he creates, but the process is extremely messy and the offcuts land up all over the floor. And if that sculptor moved from working in the medium of clay to working in the medium of metal, the mess might look different. He may not have clay and water all over the place, but he'll have chunks of metal and solder and machinery and wires and cables and the smell of burnt steel all over the place. Because the medium can change, but messiness is part of the creative process. And so these tools that we're going to get, these amazing tools that we're going to have, are going to just be a new medium for us to craft our ideas. Mess is the evidence of our craft, and there will always be messiness to what we do, even in this world of AI and generative 3D in our tool set. So for example, this is a rendering for a client project in practice by KSR Architects. And just to show you what some of the workflow looks like today, it's an extremely convoluted process. So while people think you just generate an image, actually when you want to try and refine these things and start pushing them into your into your workflow, and you're dealing with complicated sites and complicated projects and you want things to match. So the workflow starts to look something like this. And that image I showed you is actually the byproduct of something like 750 images and multiple iterations of photoshopping and merging and upscaling. What's going to happen here is that this process is going to get a lot easier. And that's actually what MattoBoard is doing, and something I want to share with you guys at the end for those of you who are interested. So when we think about it, we think that design isn't just about drawing lines anymore, and it never really was. Design is actually about shaping your ideas, and AI is actually going to be the ultimate idea amplifier for us and our ability to shape these ideas. When I'll talk a little bit about what MattoBoard's doing to influence this future of us, is that we all know that our physical sample libraries, they just don't work, frankly, and that we need to work at a pace and a speed today that physical sampling just can't keep up with. There is so much waste and so much unsustainability when actually we want to be able to generate and change ideas very, very quickly. Now, if it's true, which we believe, that the future we will do more creating and less administrating, MattoBoard is also part of that future. So if you don't know already, we have a technology in-house, an AI piece of software that takes us from physical sample libraries to three-dimensional virtual samples where you can interact and see color and texture. And I want to give you a glimpse of what the future is going to look like, which is a design process that we call design stream. This is where the future of design is going to be with a co-creator alongside of you. Here we're searching MattoBoard's library and we're asking for a soft pink interior, but we have something specific. We want it to be commercial grade, LEED compliant, have a slip resistance of R2, and have a 2-hour fire rating. So Design Stream asks us if we have a specific location. In this case, we say yes, it's in Ontario. And we also have a reference image that we really like. And Design Stream will then start to search the library for materials that fit that specific criteria and allow you to move those materials directly into your board, as well as helping you with visualizing ideas and inspiration using the board as your prompt. And we believe that designers don't need to be prompt engineers and understand exactly how to describe everything that they want. We mix and match materials, and that is how we think, and those are our prompts. And then from there, we have the ability to pull material sheets directly from the sample library that you've created. And the idea here is that you can totally unlock your ability to pull together a variety of ideas instantaneously, share these with clients, and these form the building blocks of the interior designer's workflow, materials and textures, and how they relate to each other. And only when you're happy do you need to order the physical sample. So in the future of interior design tools and 3D, what can we expect? Well, I definitely want to leave you guys with this message, and that is there really is no better time to be a designer. I genuinely believe that. I think it is such an extremely exciting time for all of us. And for those of you that are interested, we have a founding AI stealth focus group where we are building a pretty incredible and powerful tool for the future of designers using MattoBoard. And if you're interested in shaping these tools for the industry, we build things really fast. We would love to have a good mix of students and professionals and founders and directors. It is a limited focus group. So if this is something you're interested in, please email studio@mattoboard.com. We will send you the application form, and it will be closed on a first come, first basis. If you guys like this, I'd also encourage you to sign up to smallhuge.com. I have a micro newsletter for interior designers. I take small ideas that have big impact in design and psychology, and I squeeze them into 1 minute. And that's it. I really hope that this was a useful exercise in just thinking about ideas around how 3D and AI are going to impact us. And I encourage all of you to stay abreast of the technology and get in touch with us, and definitely try out MattoBoard.com.